So welcome to today's Think Tank Thursday. We're going to be talking about utilizing resources that are available to you for creative mentoring. Before we go ahead and get started, just a couple of housekeeping or announcements. Some events that are coming up, you can find these on the Akuai website, but later today, actually, I think right after the session, there's going to be a roundtable for women in housing. Tomorrow we have an LGBTQIA+ roundtable and a couple others coming up. Feel free to check the website to see what's coming up and register for those events if you're interested. We also have a couple of online resources, just want to remind you of. These are great in order to connect with individuals, get some development resources, look at past presentations if there's something that you missed, you couldn't make it to, and really great infrastructure here for some development. Okay, just a quick introduction of myself and who's going to be talking with you today. My name is Rebecca or Becca Gillison. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and currently I'm the Associate Director for Residence Life at the University of Hawaii at Hilo. So it may be afternoon for most of you. It is morning for me, 9 a.m. So thank you so much for allowing me to start my morning with you this way. And I'm really excited to talk to you a little bit about mentoring. We're going to talk about an overview of what mentorship has looked like in the past, maybe why that doesn't serve us well anymore, and kind of shifting to what is creative mentoring. Looking at those solutions that we can figure out on our campus with what resources we have available. We're going to do some idea sharing and then takeaways and resources for our networking opportunity, either with this group or with people on our campuses. So throughout the presentation today, I want you to ponder two questions, and we'll have time to kind of share at the end, but I would love for you to think about who has been a positive mentor in your life. This could be early on in your career, it could be happening now, it could be in one area or something that someone has taught you that's been really valuable to you as a professional or as a person. But usually when we think about mentors or mentorship, someone pops into our mind. It could be a supervisor that kind of had that dual role. It could be a peer mentor or a family member. So I want you to kind of think about that person that has been a mentor in your life throughout this presentation to kind of guide you in what that looks like. And then I also want you to kind of think through, who do you look up to / aspire to on your campus? And this can be someone that you have a relationship with or you do not have a relationship with. It could be someone, like your president or your chancellor that you look up to and you hope to be that person one day. It could be your supervisor. It could be the director of your area. Who do you aspire to be on your campus, or who do you look up to? And that could be for the title or the position, or it could be for the qualities of that professional. So throughout the conversation and the presentation, just kind of thinking through what those look like. Feel free to jot down some notes, and we're going to talk about that towards the end. So I'm going to talk a little bit about an overview of what traditional mentoring has looked like in the past. And of course, I think there's a lot of debate on what this looks like traditionally on some campuses or not. And there is some flexibility. But when you look at kind of the timeline or history of mentoring, when we think about traditional, we think about what I like to call the perfect conditions. And so what that entails really is that a mentor influences the personal and professional growth of a mentee. So pretty straightforward. You can have a mentor that is assigned to you. It could be something that happened organically, but really they influence what that growth looks like for that other person. Usually it's a reciprocal and collaborative at-will relationship. So it is something that can be as intensive or a couple of meetings here and there, but at-will is really no necessary responsibility or accountability. Usually it's not a program. This happens more organically. And when you have reached that goal or have completed your growth, if you will, in that area, sometimes that mentorship relationship fizzles out. It often occurs between a senior and entry-level employee for career development. And this is more of the traditional sense, but there are also traditional mentorships where there's not necessarily an entry level, but more a newer employee that could be in a position on a campus, something like that. But usually it's a senior staff member who has more experience in the field, in that area, in the department, and then someone who is coming in newer into that position, and they're paired together. Often the mentor and mentee are internal to an organization. So at the same university, at the same department, at the same company. And it's someone that funnels through not necessarily just the supervision, but the ideas of the organization, or how do we develop you to create this for us? And so in the traditional sense, it's more of a job capacity. Mentors often act as a role model for their mentee and provide that guidance. And so while traditional mentoring, I think a lot of times is what we think of when we are crafting mentorship, it doesn't necessarily serve us in all areas and capacities, as well as it may not be available to all of us. And so thinking about creative mentoring and shifting that idea, it really was starting to develop out of necessity. So I will say for myself, at my university here, I am the only person in my department, in my area, and in my field at my school, and actually on my island. And so I don't necessarily have an individual that I can help mentor me. And so when I was looking for some development, some mentorship, this for me was really created out of necessity. Where do I look for this? Because a lot of times when we think about the perfect type of traditional mentoring, it can be a barrier for a lot of people for a lot of reasons, just out of resources, what's available to us, or maybe the individual that would naturally mentor you is not something or someone that you feel comfortable with or can in that area. And so really thinking about what are those limitations and then get creative with that is how creative mentorship is going to develop for you. Also recognizing that staff needs are dynamic. And so when we think about traditional mentoring, it is more of a professional type of sense, but that's not necessarily what we all need from a mentor. So sometimes those things are personal in nature. It could be professional, could be our time of life, about our identities. So for example, mentorship at a specific time of life can be very important. So if there's a professional who is transitioning to retirement, a lot of times we don't necessarily think about mentorship in that way because they're finishing their career, but someone may need a mentor in order to talk through what that transition looks like after you're not working full time anymore. Another time of life could be a new marriage, a new child, something that's added to your professional life or that affects your professional life and your personal life. It could be a big life event that you just need some development for. How do I navigate this happening in my life while I'm also a professional in my department on this campus? And then speaking about identities as well, I think especially if your department or your university doesn't necessarily have built-in structures for mentorship, coaching, or supervision based on identities, you may need to have that safe space in another area. So finding a colleague that has similar identities than to you and figuring out how do they navigate it? How can you connect with one another and help support each other? And so thinking through the dynamic needs of yourself and other staff members, this can really help creative mentoring can really help fill those needs. It is very non-traditional. So departments may not have any infrastructure for mentoring. There may not be a program in your department or on your campus for that. And so figuring out if you do need mentorship, how do you get that on your own, which kind of shifts the responsibility to the mentee or the person who's looking for that. So instead of a mentorship program as a senior level, mentoring a newer professional or a newer position in that role, that it's kind of a flipped on its head, where I, as a mentee, may be looking for something specific or need development in certain areas. And it's going to be my responsibility to figure out how to get that. How am I going to look for the resources that I have and be creative with reaching out and developing that? So, kind of talking through some suggestions or going more in depth for what you can do to have that creative mentorship in your life. So, mentors can be for different areas of your life and they can overlap. So, you can have a mentor, say you have a colleague in another office that is really great at supervision. And that's an area that you would like to grow in personally, but they are also really good at fiscal responsibilities. Maybe those are the two areas that you go to that person for questions, help, and development as a mentor, but they don't necessarily have to be your mentor as a whole. Maybe you feel like you have more experience in an area that they don't. And so it doesn't necessarily have to be a one-on-one relationship. It can be reciprocal. It can be, you can have multiple mentors for multiple different areas of what you're looking for. And it doesn't have to be a senior or more experienced person. So, of course, there is peer mentoring. And so, thinking about it from that aspect, maybe you have a colleague in your department that you feel really comfortable with, that they rock it out at something, or you admire them because they're really organized, or they, have really great developing relationships with other people in their areas. Maybe they network really well. Reaching out to them to say, hey, could you talk me through this? Or I'm struggling in this area, or I have this idea. How do I develop it? I've seen that you've done that in the past. In my experience, people really love to talk about themselves. And so if you ask them, hey, you're really good about this thing, how can I be better about it? People are more than willing to talk you through that, to explain their passion or something that they're good at, and you can gain those skills and work on that yourself. You can reach out for those specific pieces like I talked about. So if there's someone in one area that you really admire, you can reach out to them to say, hey, I'm working on this project. Can you help me with it? And get that mentorship in that area. And then in another department, or even internally, there's someone that works well in this area. And so reaching out for different and specific pieces that you can identify that you're interested in. You can also create your own development group. I think a lot of times, more so newer professionals, but we have this barrier to that perfect condition or to the resources that are available to us. So if there is not a development type of program, if there's not a mentorship program built into your university, a lot of times that doesn't connect with newer professionals. They just go without instead of taking on that responsibility themselves. And so if that's a need for yourself, or maybe multiple colleagues that you talk to, and you feel like you may be lacking that mentorship outside of supervision, I really encourage you to create your own development group. Maybe there can be a group of 5 or 6 people that talk about their needs and how they can help support each other in that mentorship just amongst themselves. I also really encourage people to look outside of their institution. So there's so many different ways that you can do this, but of course I just put a few on the screen. So conferences are a great way. A lot of times people go to conferences to network as well as to gain that information. And so if you're going to a session and a presenter is talking about something that you feel passionate, connected with, you would like development on, connect with that presentation or that presenter. Hey, could you send me your materials? Do you have a business card? Could we exchange numbers or emails? Let's talk through that, and then really following up. And that's the key after conferences for that networking or that mentorship, is to follow up after you make that connection. So 2 weeks, a month later, sending them an email. Hey, do you remember me? We talked at the conference. Could you send me your materials? Or I really enjoyed that. And then continuing that. But part of it is that responsibility piece shifting that we talked about. So having the mentee be responsible for reaching out and developing that relationship and maintaining that relationship. If you want mentorship in a specific area, if someone is not necessarily offering it, getting creative with how are you going to take that. Of course, a kuhai is a great opportunity to network, to find mentors in different areas on subject matters or in fields, or maybe transitioning to another area. I personally was interested in joining subcommittees or helping with conferences in order to get more networking and mentorship in other areas and connecting with professionals at different schools who may have different ideas. The last think tank we had was really interesting because we had a roundtable discussion and just kind of talking through academic resources. And something I'm trying to do is develop LLCs on my campus. And so it was a really great way for me to gain some mentorship and make connections just through that one conversation. Hopefully today we'll be able to do something similar as well. And so taking advantage of those opportunities that are given. Social media is also a really great place to make those connections. So that could be on our traditional platforms, that could be on LinkedIn, but making sure that you're reaching out and utilizing that, looking at people's interests, their job descriptions, what areas or schools they've worked at before, and reaching out to gain that mentorship. Another area that could be really great for creativity and mentorship is working towards a goal and then using that goal to enhance your connection or mentorship. So it could be something as simple as I want to network more, or I would like to, a goal in the next year would be to present at a conference. If those things, especially for newer professionals, if those are things that people have never done before, then reaching out to other individuals who have done that and creating or practicing, if you will, that network or mentorship type of relationship. If you're interested in maybe changing your programmatic strategy, if you are striving for a new position or that next degree for yourself, having people that have gone through that before or are seasoned in that area or very confident in that is a great way to signal, okay, this is something that I want to do in my life. I know it's a goal I would like to achieve. How can I reach out to someone to mentor me to help me get there? Again, it's that responsibility of the mentee, but that's also a really great way if you don't necessarily have one person in mind that sticks out that you want to reach out to, but maybe it's a goal. Maybe it's something that's specific to you. You would like to grow in an area, learn more, or develop. This is going to be a great way for you to kind of orient your thinking of who do I reach out to for which pieces. So this is what's called a mentoring map. I do have a QR code on the screen, so if you have your phone, feel free to scan it. It should take you to the PDF, but it could be a little funky on your phone. So if you would like to, if you're on a laptop, you can also just search NCFDD mentoring map and it should pop up. So that stands for National Center for Faculty Development and Diversity. And so I know a lot of people on this network or this group are not necessarily faculty, but it does have really great ideas of how you can figure out what that mentoring looks like. And so when we're thinking about this creative mentoring, instead of a linear senior to less senior professional, linear type of connection, thinking about it more as a map in different areas with different people and plugging in and taking resources that we have available to us. And so this is a great way to just kind of get your brain thinking of different areas for you that you would need mentorship in, that you would, or maybe areas that you already have that. And so thinking through, there are some areas that are kind of mapped out or generalized, and then it asks to fill in. So you can do this if you print it out, you can write down. It also is interactive on the PDF, so you can click and type in if you would like and then print it out later. But the main areas, one is professional development. And so that's really traditional when we're thinking about mentoring, looking at internal and external. So do you get professional development internally from specific tasks, from a position, from a supervisor, but internal to your either organization or department, and then external. Is there development that you have received or you would like to receive that is external to your department, your university? So when I'm looking at this internally for me, professional development, I think one of the best professional developments internally is to get really good at your job. So kind of mastering your tasks, really making sure that you're developing your job responsibilities, and that's going to be great professional development. Something for me externally is I had the privilege of being at NHTI a few years ago. I applied for that and went through that program, and that was great professional development for me. That program doesn't necessarily, or you don't have to necessarily go through a program for it to be external. It could also be a connection that you made, a conference that you went to, something of that nature. Something that I think is more non-traditional in our mentorship map is that emotional support as a professional. That's really important, and doesn't necessarily come with mentorship in the traditional sense. So sometimes emotional support comes from friends, families, but other areas of our life too. And are those people supporting us emotionally within our positions for us as human beings? And what does that support look like? And if this is an area that you would like to develop more, maybe writing down some people that you feel comfortable with going to and developing that relationship. Community mentorships, this could be in your city, in your state, outside of that area, geographic area. Community can mean a lot of different things for other people. So it could be an organization that you're responsible for, or it could be the community center or a gym that you go to. But what for you connects and helps you develop in your community? And then that role model piece. So kind of thinking back to, who do I aspire to be? Who do I look up to? What types of things would I like to achieve? Role models are a great way for us to orient goal setting. So if there's a person that you really admire in their professional career, if there is a person that you aspire to have certain qualities of, or a specific position. And then looking at our substantive feedback, what type of feedback are we getting? This is more geared towards faculty members, but you could also be working on this, especially if you are in PhD work or if you do grant writing, things like that in your position. So more of our academic focused. But do you have department colleagues that can help give feedback on different things? Editors or readers of reviewers, if you will, of new policies, procedures that you're writing. Who can you go to help you develop those things or to help you edit those things? And then access to opportunities. And so really thinking about more of the traditional mentorship route. Do we have internal mentors, peer mentors, or external mentors? And this can be filled in with individuals that you already have those connections and relationships with, and you would like to establish a mentorship, or it could be someone that you don't have a connection with, but you would like to gain a skill that they have, and you're going to reach out to them. And so I really want to challenge people to be brave and to do that. Maybe write down someone that's internal or external to your community or your department and make a plan to reach out to them. You could just send them a quick email. Hey, Becca, I'm working on this project that's going to be developing LLCs on my campus. I know you said that you were interested in doing that as well. Would you like to collaborate, share resources, give me feedback? And mentorship can look like that, which it doesn't necessarily, like I said, have to look like that traditional. And then that last area on the bottom left side is accountability for what really, all capital letters, matters. So this is different for everyone, but this could be specific to you or to your position or to your career. But what really matters to you, or what are those core things? So if it's looking at my position, for example, what really matters in my position is student safety. So I may look to connect with our Title IX office, fire safety on campus, security. For me personally, what really matters, maybe that could be spirituality, that could be physical health or mental health. And what are those areas that really are core to me that I can look or develop mentorship in a more personal way? So please feel free to write this down, scan it before I go on to the next. I'm going to change slides. So I'll just give a second if people haven't been able to do that yet. Okay, so we are going to do a little bit of discussion at this time. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'll put these questions in the chat, and we will do a little bit of a discussion think tank at this time. Okay, so if people would like to turn their cameras on, I'd love to see your beautiful faces, but no pressure. And I'm going to post these questions in our chat. So the first one that I would like to talk through is that person you think of when you think of a mentor. So what made that person a great mentor? Think of someone for you that was positive. You can share their information or their name. You don't have to, no pressure if you don't feel like it's appropriate. But if you could describe to us who that was and what made them a great mentor to you.
So the person I think of, can y'all hear me okay? Okay. The person I think of that first comes to mind is my mentor from college. Her name was Trisha Rodriguez at the University of North Texas. And when I first kind of decided that I wanted to be involved in student affairs, she was really instrumental in making sure that, I understood that it wasn't just student involvement 2.0. She started taking me to Division of Student Affairs meetings, having just kind of deeper conversations as to like what that looked like for me. And so I think it was the reason, something that made them so great was that she took the time to get to know me as an individual, but also to help me understand that like it wasn't just going to be all fun and games. Also help me understand the type of positions that would be best for me, being that, she's like, you're a very empathetic person. She's like, I think housing would be great for you, but I don't think you could be in it long term, or like things like that. So just having different conversations with her, and how that eventually, led me to this position that's still in housing, but I'm a program coordinator now at the University of Houston, but to now still be in housing and working with mentoring, but in a way that isn't always, that kind of like do your response type thing. And so I think she was really influential in helping me understand myself and my own limitations and strengths.
Thank you for sharing that with us. I think something important to highlight that you shared, Caitlin, is that personal aspect, understanding who you are and what that may look like for you, right? And kind of talking through the good and the bad, which we all know there both is, of how to make a best decision for you, but not necessarily just that development or professional development, but that personal connection too is really important. We have a comment in the chat from Robin. Past supervisor challenged me to step out of my comfort zone and encouraged me to see the big picture, which is really vital when we're talking about development, right? That comfort zone that we all stay in. And if we don't have someone to mentor or help develop us. And I think it's great that Robin commented that it was a past supervisor, because mentors can be supervision, right? That can happen, that coaching. Sometimes it doesn't always. And so it's always great to make sure you have other options. Who else would like to share? Maybe two more.
I can go, but don't need to. Just uncomfortable with long silences. I'm one of the folks that have been pretty lucky with supervisors. And I think for me, I've been a work-life integration person since before that was a phrase that I've seen. And both of my supervisors had a lot going on in their personal lives and were able to balance being strong professionals while still focusing on family, hobbies. And I think that ability to push me outside of 9 to 5 thinking or 8 to 5 thinking or whatever it is, right? Teach me how to say no, teach me how to focus on what's really important, and that's not always work. I think that has been a key in mentors that I've looked up to, and people who don't even realize I see them as those people, those go-to people. I found also have hobbies. They have a life outside of work, and I think especially in housing, we can get caught up in the day-to-day, and it's nice to see that we don't have to, and we could still be strong professionals.
Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, I'm not uncomfortable with long silences, so we can just sit. It's totally fine. I have a couple of comments to read. So someone in the chat said what made their mentor great was that they really wanted to get to know them, and that people are able to give that push, challenge to stretch themselves, to reevaluate what professional goals they might have or think that they have. I think just to comment on this, for me personally, that is really, it reminds me of someone specific that's been a mentor to me that talked about, really mastering your area before you continue to move up. And I think that was true for me, especially as a newer professional. You want to just hit the ground running. You want that, gold star, that next position. You're really motivated for that. And having someone to say like, whoa, before you can move on, you have to do this step, right? You have to continue. You can't be a director and, you have to have those years of service, just, mind you. But also something that they taught me is for them, they've been in a middle manager role for the last 15 years. And that works for them. And they said, you don't necessarily have to have that title, right? You don't have to move up. And for them personally, they're able to balance their personal life, their relationships, their other priorities, because they feel comfortable and have mastered that. And they're comfortable in that position. They want to retire from there. And just realizing that it's okay. You don't necessarily have to always have that next goal. And so mentorship can be very personal and help you not only achieve things, but reorient those goals that, we're talking about here. And then another comment talked about, they have a friend who mentors them in getting involved in community service and community causes. And that is a great area outside of our development or professional life that I think mentorship doesn't necessarily hit on a lot of times. And sometimes it can. You can have a great mentor who's all encompassing, and we hope for that for everyone. But having areas of your life that you can develop and connect with, right? I've been very focused on my health recently, and my supervisor may not necessarily have that strength, but I can have a gym buddy that I go with that I don't work with, and they can be a good mentor for me physically in that aspect, right? So kind of piecing together, and that's what creative mentoring is all about. So figuring out those areas of your life that you may need some challenges, some growth, maybe you need to pump the brakes a little bit. Where can you find that? And so we all have great examples of what that looked like to us, but honestly, each person goes back to that personal aspect. Who we are as humans can really help, and we need that support and development. Okay, so moving on to the next question. Thinking through, who on your campus do you aspire to be? You don't have to say names. It could be a person, it could be a position, it could be a skill that someone has, but what are you aspiring, or what is something that you look up to? If people are comfortable sharing, maybe we'll probably have time for maybe one or two.
I can think of something. There's a member of our campus faculty, and he's in the history department. And he's had a number of others, like short-term special assignments. I think he's in charge of student undergraduate scholarship research or something at this point in time. But why I would see him as a mentor, someone that I would aspire to be, is he seems to always have campus announcements to do the fun and exciting events and programs on campus. I don't know what leverage he has, but he seems to always have those opportunities coming from his email. And so I figure he must have a high level of trust, but also a certain relationship with the student body to be able to read their interests, to have this successful ongoing sort of funding and permission to do different campus-wide events. And I think that's something worth aspiring to.
I love that. Thank you for sharing. And sometimes it sounds like you are interested in having more fun in your professional life. And I think we all hopefully are incorporating that in. And so having someone, I have someone like that on my campus too. They just did a like car maintenance 101 program, and they drove a car up to the student union platform and taught everyone how to change a tire and things like that, and I'm like, oh, I would aspire to do something like that, so it could just be a skill. It could be, developing more of that fun connection with students, things like that. Robin said, a colleague who has the ability to connect with anyone and everyone. She can engage with everyone with a big smile. Yeah, those charismatic people, I know who you're talking about. And if that doesn't come naturally to you, that's okay too. But using your strengths in order to connect with people more, and learning from that human on how they do that, and then making it genuine to yourself. Okay, looking at next couple of questions is, where do we find mentors? And then kind of, which we've already covered a little bit, what areas of your life are you looking for mentorship? And so a lot of times when we have a barrier to mentors is because we can't find that traditional sense, right? I'm looking for an all-encompassing person that I can be mentored by. And that creates a barrier for us. And a lot of times people just don't look for mentorship because they haven't found that person, or they don't know how to reach out for certain things. And so thinking through that, how do we find mentors? I want to kind of break that mindset of it has to be that traditional sense, and looking at how do we find pieces of mentorship instead of how do we find a mentor. And so that mind map, or that mentorship map that I shared, is a great way to kind of get those juices flowing. So these are the areas, all the different areas of my life that are important to me that I want to develop, and then thinking through, who has that? Who can I reach out to? How can I get those pieces? We had another comment in the chat from Devin, talking about aspiration and being included in more decision-making conversations. Oh, this is so great. That would raise my awareness of politics and play with our department, division, university. I think politics as a professional is such an area of growth for a lot of people. It can be difficult. It can also be really helpful. And so having a mentor that can guide and then also shield, I think, is important in a lot of ways, right? It's like, oh, I know where all the landmines are. Don't step there. Make sure you mark that one, right? And that can be really helpful and vital to a lot of especially newer mid-level professionals as they move up in their career. So the last question that I want to talk about is kind of flipping it a little bit and thinking about, when did you last mentor someone? So I know we're talking about receiving mentorship, but also thinking about giving mentorship. And for some of us, that may be all the time. It may be built into our positions. We may mentor people that we supervise. We may mentor students in different capacities, whether that's conduct, care, programs, things like that. But what does that look like for you? I would love to hear from people on, what does mentorship giving, or when have you mentored people, and how often does that happen for you?
So I haven't been at this position for too long. I'm going on, I think, like my second month. But there are some graduate assistants who are working with us over the summer with our summer conferences. And so one of the individuals was potentially interested in applying to a job here and was like, I just don't know if like what I've done, like I know I could do the job, I just don't know if my resume like explains that I could do that job. And so it was during one of my first weeks working here, and so I didn't really know what to do anyways. And so I was like, well, just like come in, like we'll set up a meeting and go through, you know, your resume and do like, you know, and after the fact, I kind of realized like, oh, I was fully doing like career coaching, mentoring, because he's about to go into his graduate program for higher ed. And so going through that process, talking through like what things look like, how to use certain words to not be too redundant in our resumes, like, you know, using fancy words that really exemplify what we've done. And so, yeah, so giving all those different tips and tricks. And I think it was something I like didn't expect. So it was like, oh, I'm the new person here, you know, but really that those like mentorship / mentoring, like, or being mentored too, those opportunities can kind of pop up in any way. So it was a good reminder of that, because traditionally I would think, oh, like my previous RAs, but that was also a mentorship opportunity that happened.
Thank you for sharing that. That's a great example. We had a couple more comments in the chat. Robin said that their goal is, their goal is to mentor everyday new and old colleagues. That's great, like being a good role model and offering that to other individuals. Devin said, I was paired with an undergraduate who was planning to go into the field of student affairs. So we had a formal mentorship connection since 2020. Now she'll be starting her graduate program in just 2 weeks. Amazing. I bet that feels really good, Devin. I'm glad that you were able to do that and that you were interested in doing that in mentorship. And so it looks like at Devin's university, there may be that formal type of connection, which is wonderful. So if you do have that at your university, I highly encourage you to reach out and become a part of that. If you don't, that's okay. There's other ways to do it. Another comment says, if someone seeks me out to mentor them, I've never turned someone down yet. I like that. So it sort of depends on how often, how many, and when, but usually it happens when some grads that want to learn more about things on my side of the house. However, our division does a staff freshman mentor mentee program, and I typically sign up to be a part of that. That's great. More of that built in. Some ways that you can offer mentorship, it can be a reciprocal relationship. A lot of that peer mentoring that we talked about earlier can happen organically, where you have an area that you are really confident and you excel in, and then a colleague of yours has some other area that you would like, and it can be a symbiotic thing. But I think it's important too, when we're thinking about mentorship and gaining mentorship, we also have to be willing to give that mentorship, especially to our students, our graduate students, our entry level or newer professionals. When we're middle managers or moving up in that, it now becomes our responsibility, not only to our own professional development, but to help others. And so thinking through that creative mentorship, what does that look like? And just because a newer professional is coming into the field or into their position doesn't mean they don't also have things to offer. And so if you do that professional or that traditional style of mentorship program, a lot of times I have gained a lot of information from the person that I'm mentoring as well, and how to be more energetic or more connected, or what that looks like. Something for me recently that happened is I was in a meeting, it was more of a disciplinary meeting with a professional staff member, and we were talking about accountability, and they felt really uncomfortable with conflict and how to manage that, and they weren't holding their staff members accountable, and it was affecting the department and job responsibilities. And so part of that was taking on not necessarily just that supervision, but that extra mentorship of that person as a human, and saying, okay, you're uncomfortable with conflict. We need to dive into that. Why are you uncomfortable? Where does that come from? What does that look like? And then inviting them to any conversation I had about conflict. So that could be a conduct conversation, that could be another supervision type of piece, with that other person's permission, of course, but that so that they can see and role model that behavior for them and mentor them maybe in one area, that doesn't necessarily have to be a full-blown relationship. And it doesn't cost me anything, especially if I'm already doing those meetings and just having them incorporated into that. And so that time constriction or resources may be something that's a barrier for you or for another person to be your mentor. And so just thinking through that creative solution of not only who can I connect with, but how can I integrate them, or how could I be integrated into something that they already do? And so it's not taking up more resources or time for that person. And hopefully you'll be able to connect a little bit more and have that relationship. And once you start in one area, continue in another. Okay, so for our last thing, I'm going to reshare my screen. I would like to give an opportunity to this group to connect if you are interested. So feel free to pull out your phones. If you do have a cell phone, you can scan the QR code. I will also put the link in the chat so that you can paste that into a browser if you would like. But if you're interested in mentoring as a network with this group or with other individuals in think tank areas, please feel free to fill out this Google form. It's going to ask you some areas that you either feel confident in giving mentorship or areas that you're interested in receiving it. And those are all based on the Akuhuai competencies. And so there's also some other options too, if you are interested in other areas or if you want to give mentorship in other areas. Please feel free to fill out whatever you would like if you're comfortable. And then I will do a matching, if you will, or sending out of resources to everyone so that they can be utilized.
Rebecca, I just wanted to let you know, you sent us the link to the, we're able to edit the questions.
Oh, yes. That's unfortunately, that's the only way outside of my organization that I can share. Yeah, so
okay.
just
sure.
Oh, yeah, just feel free to not edit, please. Let me put the link in the chat as well for others. Thank you for mentioning that. I was going to make a disclaimer. I was fiddling with it yesterday on my other Google account and trying to be able to fill it out, and I have to make it public for everyone to edit in order for them to fill out. So. Well, thank you all so much for spending some time with me in my morning, maybe your afternoon. And if you are interested, please feel free to fill out that Google form, and I appreciate you letting me talk at you for the last hour.